Hello and welcome to the Full Scottish on Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Lindi Harrison. Today we've got with us Jim Fairlie, he's a farmer and caterer, and we've also got Willie Harper, who's a tenant farmer and regional chair of NFU Scotland. So nice to have you both on with me. Thank you very much for being here. So today we're going to be starting with a BBC documentary, Dark Side of Dairy, which you may have heard of, that came out on Monday the 10th, just there. So, of course, before we get into that, we do have a video to show. So we'll start with the video and then we'll go on and we'll start from there. Yes, so we've got an interview with Ian Blackford MP and, of course, the start of the 500-mile walk. And you'll get to see a bit of that in the upcoming video.
We're starting a 500-mile walk today, over the next 3 weeks, from Portree or Skye, through 70 different towns and villages, meeting up with 106 different age groups, and we're going to arrive on the All Under One Banner Edinburgh March on the 6th of October.
People's doorstep referendum. Be the change.
First of all, could I ask you about your reaction to the UK government's Agricultural Bill and the impact on Scottish farming?
We have very real concerns at what is going on with agriculture, and I have to say the UK government's got form. If we go back to 2013, the European Commission granted Scotland additional funds because they recognised that we have a very low level of support for hill farmers and crofters in Scotland. The so-called convergence money is supposed to be 230 million of euros coming to the UK over a 4-year period between 2016 and 2020. We knew that the vast bulk of that money should come to Scottish crofters and farmers. What has happened is that Scotland is getting 16.5% of it. I mean, I would put this quite simply to you, that this is money that Europe has intended to come to Scotland that Westminster has withheld. I think that really demonstrates quite clearly that we can't trust Westminster to look after our farming and crofting interests. And I think there is some real concern now. We've had the withdrawal bill that's gone through Parliament, that we know that Westminster has taken back control of areas of agriculture that should sit with our Parliament here in Edinburgh. I would far rather see our Parliament in Edinburgh have full responsibility for all agricultural matters, but there isn't that clarity with the Agricultural Bill which has come forward. So there are some concerns that we have there. We need to make sure that we have a climate and environment that people want to become involved in crofting and farming. We're here in the Isle of Skye, and I can tell you that over the course of the last few years, the number of people that are active crofters has declined. We need to make sure that people are supported properly, and I would trust a Scottish government to do that, not a government in Westminster.
You might have seen that the NFU have made a complaint to the BBC regarding inaccuracies and misreporting on their disclosure programme regarding the dark side of dairy. What did you make of that?
Well, I think it's right that the NFU have raised what are legitimate concerns. I think issues of animal husbandry is something that people are very concerned about. I get an awful lot of emails from people very concerned about that issue. What I would say is that I am a crofter myself. I have sheep, and all of us that have animals have got a duty of care for these animals. We want to make sure that they are properly looked after. And I think there is a case that the film has exacerbated concerns that animals have not been looked after properly, that in this particular case that the impression was created that the animals were being transported over long distances into North Africa without any due concern that was given to their welfare and livelihood. And we know that that's not the case. That was an erroneous picture that was presented. I would simply say that when we're discussing these matters, it has to be factual and evidence-based, and the NFU are right to raise these issues with the BBC.
The High Court have found that there's been 3 breaches of the law by the Vote Leave campaign, and that the Electoral Commission itself was given erroneous advice. Can I have your views about that?
I think the Electoral Commission have got some answers to give, some explaining to do. The backdrop to this is that we know that Vote Leave were fined because they didn't adhere to the rules, the regulations, the laws that are there. But we also now know that the Electoral Commission have not made sure that Vote Leave were given the correct advice through this whole process. We need to know that when people vote, that there's a level playing field. We need to know that there's fairness there, that everybody is being treated the same. And this unfortunately does create the impression that the Electoral Commission have not been fit for purpose in the way that they've handled the EU referendum in 2016. So questions have to be asked, but it's not just about Vote Leave, it's not just about the Electoral Commission, but we have to remember the impact of people such as Cambridge Analytica. So there's a whole issue here, and if I may say so, we've also got the situation in Scotland with the dark money, the allegations which have been put to the Conservative Party that simply haven't been answered properly. So we need to make sure that the public can have faith and full trust in the political process, and the Electoral Commission has certainly not helped in making sure that we can deliver that transparency, that fairness and that trust that people need.
Can we now move on to the Boundary Commission regarding the proposed boundary changes?
Well, I think there is real concern and an outrage indeed in many parts of Scotland from the proposals which have now been laid in front of Parliament. The proposals have been laid, but we don't know when the government's going to bring them forward and have a vote on them. And I suspect that is because they're concerned that they won't get the measures through. And I hope that they can't get them through, but we'll have to wait and see. But the implications for Scotland, I think, are pretty severe. Scotland would go down from 59 to 53 constituencies, and I think there is a real issue about a democratic deficit. We shouldn't be cutting MPs for Scotland that need to go down and make sure that we're standing up for constituency. We should be looking at the unelected House of Lords, where there are more than 800 members of that chamber. That's what we should be looking at, not looking at cutting the number of MPs. Now, when we then consider the impact that this will have, and we're here in the Isle of Skye, so the seat that I represent currently, Skye and Lochaber, is already by far and away the biggest in Parliament. It's over 12,000 square kilometres. So it takes me 4 hours to travel this constituency north to south. It goes from the west coast of Scotland to the east coast. So if I give you the example of this week, we're on recess. But on Monday I'm going to go to Knoydart, which is a fairly isolated community, but it's important that I visit people there that I do in other parts of the constituency as well. That's a 2 ferry journey for me to get to Knoydart for a 1-hour surgery. It will take most of the day. I value the opportunity of doing that, but it's very different from people in an inner city constituency that may have surgeries in a constituency office, and perhaps that will be the limit of what they do. Then on Tuesday I'm hosting 5 surgeries in various parts of my constituency, doing the same on Wednesday and Thursday. And it means over the course of next week I'll actually only be at home one night because I can't logistically get round, come home. I've got to do that whilst I'm on the road and make sure I'm getting round as many places as possible. So next week I'm off to Bewley, to Muirvord, to Dingwall, to the island of Raasay, to I'm going to Kishorn, I'm going to Lochaber, and so on and so forth. But these places are very, very far apart, and people in those places need to know that they have access to the Member of Parliament, that the Member of Parliament will be coming and having surgeries. Now, if these proposals go through, we're going to come down from 4 Highland seats to 3. And it means that what is getting on for 45% of the land mass of Scotland is going to be represented by 3 constituencies. That's not right. It's not right that people in what are remote communities don't have the same rights of access that people have in other parts of Scotland and indeed other parts of the United Kingdom. So I'm simply saying to the UK government, you must stop this. You must make sure that there is accountability for all our communities through Scotland, and we cannot disenfranchise people the way that we're doing with these boundary changes. It would be, I'd go as far to say, it would be a disaster for the rural areas to see these boundary changes go through and people not have that effective representation.
Yes, the day of action is on the 29th of September, I believe.
Well, one of the things I think is important is that we need to have a conversation with the people of Scotland. If I go back to the referendum in 2014 here in the Isle of Skye, we had 70 public meetings around this area. I think it was one of the reasons why the island of Skye voted yes to independence in 2014. So in that context, the SNP calling a day of action throughout Scotland is very, very important. And I would say to SNP members, those that are supporters of independence, let's make sure that we're getting on the doorstep, that we're listening to people, we're talking with people, and we're having that debate about Scotland's future. Let's show that we can win the hearts and the minds, and when the time does come for that independence referendum to happen, the hard work of engaging with people in a respectful manner will be what will lead us to winning that referendum.
Finally, you've been reported in the press this week regarding the timing for the Scottish Government to make decisions on our own referendum. I think you could tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I've been in the SNP ever since a teenager, and the reason I joined the SNP, I guess, like every other member, is because I want to see Scottish independence, and I want Scottish independence to happen as quickly as possible. But you look at everything which goes on at Westminster, the democratic deficit, the fact that the poor are punished by austerity, everything which has gone on about the denying of the rights to women of a certain age, their pension rights, and so far and so on. I mean, there are so many things that would make us angry as to how we're governed in Scotland today, and I know that if we have independence, that we will have a fairer, we'll have a more prosperous Scotland, and I want that to happen as soon as is practically possible. What I would simply say is that what the First Minister has put across is we need to know what the destination of Brexit is going to be. We have a mandate from the people of Scotland through the elections to the Scottish Parliament in 2016, and once we know the outcome of Brexit, we can sit down and we look at what should be the constitutional opportunities for the people of Scotland. I think what we should be doing today, what we are doing, the First Minister said in her conference speech to the SNP way back in June, that we should be discussing the why of independence. And I'm delighted that here in Skye today we've seen off a group of walkers that are going on a 500-mile walk through Scotland, arriving in Edinburgh on the 6th of October. As much as anything else, that's about that opportunity to engage with people whilst they're on that journey, on Scotland's journey towards independence. I know that we will have that opportunity to vote on Scotland's future at some point. I look forward to that happening, and I look forward to Scotland becoming an independent nation. I know it will.
That was Ian Blackford, and of course the 500-mile walk that was starting off from Skye will be ending in Edinburgh. So just while we're on the subject, I'll just ask you for your thoughts on the 500-mile walk that was starting off, and they'll be going down and talking to people and pushing their cause.
Good for them. It shows tremendous determination. If you're going to put your boots on and walk 500 miles and spread the word, then great. But it just adds to the whole under one banner marches, the bridge demonstrations, the social media. It just reminds people that independence is still very much a live issue, and hopefully it'll be here sooner rather than later. Brilliant.
Sorry, were you about to add something?
Oh, I just hope they get good weather for it. Just there's bigger things happening in Britain alone at the moment without the call for independence at the moment. That's my kind of view on it. So yeah, but good luck to them. Hope they don't get brook it, as they say in Scottish.
500 miles of rain, hopefully not. So we'll be moving on to the BBC documentary that I mentioned earlier, The Dark Side of Derry, that aired on Monday the 10th. So could you possibly explain some of the claims that were made and some of what was insinuated in this documentary and why that was problematic?
Yeah, well, the programme, it was aired on Monday, the BBC Scotland. I think NFU Scotland was involved. Our livestock chairman, Charlie Adam, was interviewed for it. And where, I don't think the Scottish agriculture was portrayed in a bad light from it. It was shown the transportation of young calves, in particular young calves coming out of English markets that were auctioned and sold and transported through Scotland, through Cairnryan, and to Ireland. And so it was, we were quoted in it, interviewed in it. Well, overall, we're not too happy about the programme and the way it was produced and the material that was used in the programme. There was a lot of inaccuracies about some of the quotes that the reporter was claiming. Mm-hmm. So, and we've, as a union, we made an official complaint to the BBC.
Yeah. Okay, did you happen to catch that?
I didn't see the programme. I've obviously heard the fallout from it. Mm-hmm. I saw that the Times did a front page feature that the senior veterinary advisor for Scotland, she came out and actually complained about the misrepresentation from the BBC into the live calf trade. Now, as Ian said on the interview, there's absolutely no doubt that this country is animal welfare is the paramount thing for every farmer here in Scotland. There's absolutely no question of doubt about that. I think the phrase that Chief Veterinary Officer for Scotland used was inflammatory, or no, it wasn't inflammatory. She described it as a misrepresentation of what was actually happening. Mm-hmm. She would not have put her neck on the line if what was happening was anything other than being done properly for the welfare of the stock. And I think there was a couple of things that, again, I've only read this through the press. They showed an animal being slaughtered in North Africa. Now, the perception, because it had been shown in the context of a live export from Scotland, they showed the slaughter of a beast in Africa where they don't stun. It's a brutal way that they've done it. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and we just simply wouldn't condone it, and it would be illegal in this country. But the implication was that was a Scottish calf, and it wasn't. And it's that type of inaccuracy where they're not giving you, they're leaving things to assumption rather than saying, this is the fact, that animal didn't come from Scotland, that animal was reared in this country, that was how it was slaughtered. But what they were actually saying was, it could be that an animal from Scotland may land up over there. They didn't say that was. And it was that kind of vagueness that I think has really angered the Scottish dairy industry in particular. But it's one of these things. We will never, ever win that argument about live export because public perception has gone, baby calf, that type of brutal slaughter. And they've joined those two dots without knowing the details in between. And it's really difficult to come back from that. Even with the NFU writing to the BBC, it will be a headline and all the rest of it, but there's still going to be this lingering problem for the industry. And I think everybody in the industry accepts that. But what it also does is it gives an opportunity, because Scotland has the capacity to use these calves themselves. There's a marketing opportunity for us to produce fantastic rosé veal from these calves here in Scotland. Young farmers are looking for opportunities. So the Scottish Government could be working with the dairy industry and the farming industry and saying, okay, how can we know that industry is absolutely legal, that what we're doing is absolutely within the boundaries of what we want to do, and these animals are cared for very well, but perception is killing us. So because of perception, how do we change that? How do we make that better for the industry? How do we give it opportunities to the food and drink sector, which is the fastest growing sector in our economy? And how do we give young farmers an opportunity? So there's a whole load of things there that we can actually take all of that and use that as a positive. But the way the BBC handled this programme, I think, was an absolute disgrace.
Yeah. I think the disappointment is, before it was aired, it was never shown to anybody from an agricultural background, an independent person, to point out all the glaring glitches within the programme, because once it's out there, it's been shown on the TV, you can't get that back.
Yep.
Populations,
They've seen it.
The material, and
A retraction is never going to
Yeah.
work as well as the original.
the cattle getting loaded onto a ship. It was never Spain or anything. I think that was in Romania or something. Hungarian cattle in Romania. I think it's been quoted. I'm not positive about that. And then the African cattle getting slaughtered. There's just no need for them to be in the same programme altogether. And Jim brought up the point about the rosy veal. Rosy veal, is a niche market within Britain. I think that makes a good point that could be developed, and the challenge is for a young farmer willing to get involved in that, and maybe there's some support and help there to try and build that market for these young calves. There's resistance from consumers over the veal that's produced in the continent, and but the rosy veal, the animal has a far more freedom to be reared, and has a better quality of life.
Yeah, if the consumer resistance to veal is white veal, where calves are stuck in a crate and fed nothing but milk for a period of time, and then the meat is very white. Rosy veal are calves that are reared with milk, grass, and whatever grain there's. It's a natural diet, and they're allowed to grow naturally. There is a company in the Borders just now. They sell rosy veal, and they have been doing it for years, and it's a fantastic product. But because it's got the word veal in it, people have an immediate, I don't like the idea of that. But rosy veal is an entirely different product. It's still reared very naturally, and it's fantastic eating. It's a great quality product. So there's an opportunity here for us to turn that into another part of Scotland's niche, unique food heritage, and it to be a success rather than something where we were totally misrepresented by the programme that's shown on the BBC.
So I just want to quote Andrew McCormick at a letter that he sent to members saying, it was extremely disappointing to see so many misleading images and videos being linked with inaccurate claims about the Scottish dairy industry. This included showing clips of English dairy calves at an English mart, filming a lorry load of Irish cattle going to Italy, Hungarian cattle being loaded onto a ferry in Romania, and Australian cattle being slaughtered in Egypt, all while making points about Scottish dairy bull calves being legally exported to Spain. So, as you've said, obviously, this has created a false image, you could say, of the industry in Scotland that you wouldn't say was an accurate reflection of the industry itself. And of course, there has been quite a considerable, I would say, a backlash on this from the whole subject. Could you talk about the knock-on effects that have happened, particularly with, I believe it was P&O ferries, I think it was called.
So these male dairy calves, they've got no value on the farms at this particular moment in time, and the dairy industry, is a lot different from what it used to be 15-20 years ago. It's very intensive now. Low milk prices have driven the dairy industry into less farms, keeping more cows, and the advanced breeding techniques have bred these cows to produce a lot of milk. And the downside is the male dairy calves, which don't lend themselves to producing beef, simply because of the way they're bred. And so with little or no home market for them at the particular moment in time, no farmer rears an animal or helps bring an animal into the world to then have that animal to have no value and then be shot on the farm and taken away. So this scheme that was transporting calves from Britain, England, certain amount of Scottish ones as well, was giving the farmer some money for his animal, and then was going on for further rearing in the other countries. Since that programme's been aired, P&O have put a ban on any young calves being transported, simply because of the backlash, as you called it. And that's a commercial decision, but it's a disappointing one, because these calves have no market now, so there'll be more of them, I'm sure, being shot at birth, and it's really disappointing for the dairy farmers at the moment who are under severe pressure. We've had an extreme year of very cold snow and winds from the east in the spring, and then we've had an exceptionally dry summer, so they're under real pressure now from lack of fodder. Now this is another nail in the coffin for some of them, I think, it's, they're under constant pressure. Milk prices, there's only, the large retailers of milk now have driven the price down. The price per litre for the farmers the same as it was 25 years ago, but the farmers have got all the increased costs, it's sad when the way the dairy industry has been driven over the last few years. We've got to this point where there's this programme comes out highlighting the fact that calves are being transported, but in an ideal world where farmers were being rewarded more for their produce, this subject would never have come up.
I think Liz said everything that needs to be said.
Fantastic. So, on the subject of rosy veal, can you sort of explain why a market hasn't formed, like why there doesn't seem to be, a big taste for it at the moment? And
Jim's the caterer.
Consumer resistance, it's the word veal. There is a perception that veal is, as soon as you say veal, people think baby calf in a crate, fed with nothing on milk, nothing but milk, so the meat is white. Some people don't have no problem with that. They'll eat that quite happily. Others have a real issue with it. And to be perfectly honest, I've never eaten veal. I've never eaten white veal, and I don't think it's something I would eat on a matter of principle. I wouldn't eat it because of the way that animal has been reared. But rosy veal is a different thing. The male calf is going to be born, regardless of what happens. If you want milk, you need to have a calf. So if you're going to have a male calf, something has to happen with it. And as Willie says, the options at the moment are you can shoot it at birth or you can do something else with it. If we're going to do something else with it and the people in this country don't want them to be live exported, then there has to be a solution for where these calves are going to go. If they don't want them shot, they don't want them live exported, then they have to consume them. And the only way that they're going to do that is if the animals are reared in a way that makes them comfortable with eating meat. If you're going to eat meat, then this is just another form of meat. So if the calves are then put into, ideally from my point of view, in order to get young blood into the industry, if young farmers are given the opportunity to take these calves on, rear them up to a certain stage till you get them into the weaning stage where they're no longer eating, where they're no longer relying on only milk, where they can go into grass and they go into pellets and they can be fed and fattened in that way, it's then up to the consumers to support that industry and say, right, okay, we know why this is happening, we know why that rosy veal is available to us, so we're going to support it to make sure that we've all got a role to play in this. The farmers have a role, but the consumers have a role, and government has a role. Everybody has a role to play in developing what we're talking about now as the good food nation. If we're going to be a good food nation, then we have to actually be a good food nation. So if we're going to have this uproar about these live calves being exported, and we don't want it to happen, we have to do something about it in this country. And that's as much about the consumers as it is about the farmers. So understand the food that they're eating, understand the provenance of it, understand what goes into producing rosy veal, and then eat it. Eat it at a price that is sustainable for the young farmers who are trying to make a living out of it to continue to do it. That to me would solve the problem.
It's needing a marketing campaign, basically. And as I say, there's limited people there already doing it, but it's a very niche product, and you very rarely ever see veal on restaurants' menus. simply because there's never demand. There's no point in stocking it for consumers if they're not going to buy it. So there is a real marketing thing needing taken up here, and whether QMS, Quality Meat Scotland, are needing to do some work along these lines and develop a market for it. Because it's a very healthy meat, it's very low fat, yeah.
So do you think that the government could be helping with the solution, perhaps helping with marketing and really giving farmers a boost on this one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, a combined effort, government, retailers, and marketing people.
Consumers
combined.
Consumers have to be part of the solution.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think part of the problem as well is helping consumers understand, like you said, understand what the products they're eating is and where they've come from and how to,
I mean, the resistance to veal in Britain's really came from programmes like Monday Night. I remember a programme being made in the early 80s about the veal and calves then were regularly transported out the south of England to France and to Holland, where a lot of the veal was produced, and that put a ban on that, and ever since then veal has been labelled. If you go to eat in Italy, Spain or whatever, veal's regular on the menus of a lot of restaurants. So it's really only Britain, and it just shows you how 2 or 3 programmes about a certain subject and there's a great resistance. So I think, it's time we moved on and got to like veal.
Rosie.
Yeah.
Rosie. So moving on from there, the next subject I want to talk about is Brexit. And what I really want to do is go more into depth on what Brexit means for farmers, particularly like the everyday effects that people, like me who perhaps don't live on a farm, things we wouldn't hear about, wouldn't know about, and that aren't really getting the media attention they need.
Yeah, well, Brexit, people get fed up with Brexit. It's been dragging on for years now, and we're getting closer and closer to the date we actually exit the Europe. But life will have to carry on after that date comes and goes. And agricultural wise, we need trade deals. We need to know that our product that we're producing at this moment in time will be marketed in a few years' time, in 12 months, 18 months' time. And the easier we can do that, the better, without tariffs and barriers. And so the best thing for us is we get closer and closer to the deal. The deal has to be done because the alternative will, have real consequences, and not just for agriculture, but the food and the price of food the consumers are going to be buying. Mm-hmm. And we as farmers we are constantly investing in our farms, whether it be stock or machinery to able to farm, and we're employing people and all the associated trades that supply farmers and agriculture through Scotland. Their jobs and their livelihood is on the line as well. But support payments is I've grown up with support payments coming from Europe. I can't contemplate what life will be without support payments, because the population has never had food at as cheap a price. So and that's all through support from Europe. If we don't get the same level of support, I'm afraid the two choices are we have to eat a lot less because the food will not be in the shops, or we'll have to pay more for our food. There's no two ways about it if we don't get the level of support coming into agriculture, which then filters through all the associated businesses and into the rural economy, and up in some of the more remote areas in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this week's Scottish Farmer sitting here in front of me, and page 4 no deal Brexit is farming's worst case scenario. And Johnny Hall made that statement to the Scottish Select Affairs Committee during the week, and he's urging everyone to get behind the Chequers deal in order to get some kind of trade agreement going with the EU. We've got Gove launching the Green Brexit Farm Bill. We've got Red Tractor aims to be the flagship of British food. The paper is full of stuff talking about Brexit, and it has been going on for such a long time. People are fed up hearing about it, but the implications are huge, and that's the thing. People cannot take their eyes off the fact that the implications for not just the farming industry, I'm talking across the country, across Scotland, will be massive. And I recently made a claim. I organised a food farming and rural economy post-Brexit evening in Stirling, and I made the claim, and I expected to be shot down in flames for it, that the food and drink sector, including farming, are by far the biggest issues that we need to consider in Brexit. And I expected to have a lot of criticism for that, but nobody criticised it because I think people understand it. We all eat food, we all drink the water, we all breathe the air. The implications for us post-Brexit are massive, because it won't just be about the support payments. It won't just be about who's retaining the powers, because at the moment the UK government are going to retain all the powers over agriculture. We should come back to that. It'll be about the food that is going to be available to us. When we had that evening's discussion, and we talked about the ins and outs of what could or couldn't happen with Brexit, one of the farmers sitting in the audience said, well, if they're going to be importing hormone-injected beef, I'll have to do the same. Now, he's not saying that because he wants to be using hormones in his beef. He's saying it because he's not the way of surviving. How's his job, how's his farm going to survive if we do get trade deals? The trade deals aren't with the EU, they're with New Zealand, South America, North America, Canada, Australia. The Australian Prime Minister had said before he left post that they're very happy to be doing trade deals with the UK, but not if it's predicated on protecting Welsh hill farmers. For Welsh hill farmers, see Scottish hill farmer, they want to sell us agricultural produce, and we will sell them life sciences, financial services. We'll sell them services rather than products, and they're going to sell us products. That, to me, looks like the direction we're going. If Johnny Hall's right, that we don't want a no-deal scenario, but it's looking increasingly like that's what we're going to get. So if we do revert to WTO standards, or WTO trade deals, where does that leave agriculture in Scotland? To me, it is the worst possible case scenario, that we're part of a UK which is going to retain all the powers over agriculture, food and environment. We're out of the EU with none of the protections that come from the EU, and we resort to WTO trade deals. And the UK needs trade deals with all the rest of the world, and they're going to sell us agricultural products. Which sacrifice is going to be made by a UK government? It's going to be agriculture. It has traditionally been agriculture, and particularly Scottish agriculture. We heard Ian Blackford talking there about the convergence money. The convergence money was supposed to have come to Scotland. We got 16.5% of the total, but that was money that was determined by the EU to come to Scotland on the basis that we had such low per hectare payments. That was the recognised method of measuring how much payments came into the industry, and that was money that was supposed to have come here. They didn't put any protected geographical indicators in the Comprehensive European Trade Association deal. They have got form, as Ian says, on not protecting agriculture in Scotland. Now, the Scottish Government has had its own problems. The fact that we've had delayed payments through the transition from the previous EU system to the current EU system, the Scottish Government had its problems, but it's done its damnedest to try and mitigate those problems, realising that it was having a very real effect in people's livelihoods. The UK Government have had much bigger problems, have had hundreds of millions of pounds deducted from the payments that they've had from the EU, and nobody said a word about it. We need to have a government that sees agriculture and the food and drink industry as absolutely vital to the Scottish economy, to our environment, and to the health of the country. And I don't think that Westminster does that anywhere near enough, whereas the Scottish Government does. And we're coming to a point, we're going to have a fork in the road. And it's at that time, we need to make a decision about which way we're going to go.
Anything you want to add on that? Or?
No, I mean, yeah, we need a deal. And obviously we need a good deal. not any deal. So yeah, but it's all up in the air, and we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. I confess I've been trying to farm and trying to gather my harvest and fodder over the last couple of weeks, and only been working in sleep. And I haven't read all the bill that came out last week. I've read some summaries on it and stuff like that.
I've only read the summaries as well, if I'm being honest. But what I do know is this: he's launched his Green Brexit Bill. Gove has launched his Green Brexit Bill. They're focusing on the environment, and they're focused on access to land. There are certain things that I think are good. There are areas there where we're looking at the potential for farmers to retire out of the industry to allow young farmers to come in. There are certain bits about it that I think could work.
Yeah.
But it certainly doesn't take any cognizance of the fact that 85% of Scotland's land is LFA. There's not going to be, I should explain, LFA is less favoured area, which means it's ground which is disadvantaged. There's only certain things you can do with it. By and large, that's grazing land. Both myself and Willie both have grazing land. The vast majority of our land is grazing land. That's the areas that need to be protected. And the bit that really frightens me about the UK government having taken control of all the UK Agricultural Bill, there are several things that frighten me. One, they've got an advisor on the DEFRA board whose absolute lifetime's ambition is to turn non-profit making farms without subsidy. If you can't have a profit without subsidy, then they shouldn't be farming. Turn them into wildlife parks. A guy called Ben Goldsmith. He's made it his life's ambition to develop green areas, afforestation and all the rest of it. Now there's an argument for having a very rich and diverse landscape, and we've got that here in Scotland, but not at the expense of not being able to produce food. We should still be able to produce food in these upland areas. It's high quality. We've got carbon capture because of the land mass that is there. It's a fantastic natural product that comes off these hills, but if it's left to the UK government, those areas will be bereft of people working livestock anymore because it's not what they see in their big picture. The Scottish Government, on the other hand, absolutely see the upland farming as crucial to the industry. So that's one of the first things. In terms of taking back the powers, they have they've said that they want to do this over a 7-year period in order to not disrupt the internal market of the UK. But the internal market of the UK is of 64 million people. The EU market is 500 million people. We're already at a disadvantage because of the kind of landscape that we have. We've got a minister who is talking about environmental and access to the land. We already do that here in Scotland. But he's not giving any cognizance at all. He's not putting anything in place to give us an LFA scheme. So are we going to be the sacrificial lambs at the altar, for want of a better phrase? Because where does it leave Scottish agriculture? The National Farmers Union of Scotland have been quite clear that the powers pertaining to agriculture should have been returned to the Scottish Government, and the National Farmers Union they've made that point right from day one. So they say that they very much agree with what's happening in Westminster. They don't agree on that. They absolutely don't agree on that. And Andrew McCormick sat in the meeting that we were at, and he reiterated that fact, that the powers should be coming back to Scotland, and the policy should be kept here in Scotland and developed here in Scotland because of our unique landscape and agricultural industry. The RPA is the Rural Payments Agency in England. They're the ones I was just talking about, who have hundreds of millions of pounds of deductions from the EU for late payments, and nobody said a word about it. DEFRA are going to develop the policy that is going to shape the future of where agriculture is going to go. And in the advisory board, you've got a guy who wants to turn non-profit making farms into parklands or wildlife havens. Where does that leave agriculture in Scotland? 15% of the land in England is LFA, 85% in Scotland is LFA. There's a complete contrast of how the two industries work, but there doesn't seem to me anything from what Gove was talking about that is going to protect our industry.
Mm-hmm. So do you think the bill doesn't deliver on promises made during and after the referendum?
Which referendum?
The EU.
European.
In fact, it's an open question. You could actually go ahead and talk about both because they are both relevant to what's been happening.
The first thing that they said during the Scottish independence referendum is, you'll be out of Europe. Well, we are. So, there's a level of irony there, to say the least. In terms of what they talked about in the referendum for being in or out of the EU, we're still not clear on what it is that they're going to deliver. We've no idea what they're going to do.
This paper, this bill, is the first step. They've made promises before, but this is the first thing they've published, they've written down. So, we're hoping, NFU Scotland, hoping that all the powers will remain in Scotland. That's our wish. And the framework that Scotland's going to be dropping down, we'll still have the power to determine into which schemes support goes, and obviously we'll be bound about some greening elements. But we think we are already ready there with the greening. We don't need anything more greening because Scotland is a green, beautiful place, and we're already doing a lot of good work on the uplands, especially, and a lot of the extensive grazing areas with sheep and cattle, and we're not needing any more extra environmental stuff. We don't have a huge mass of good land to produce quality products like malt and barley, which is so important to the other big industry in Scotland, which is a real success story, and at the heart of that is arable farmers in Scotland that grow the malt and barley. One of the greening issues at the moment with us was imposed by Europe. Maybe one of the reasons a few farmers had voted for Brexit, because of silly greening rules coming out of Europe, which really was specifically about Central Europe, France, Germany, and extensive arable with no really... It
was about trying to get crop rotation, wasn't it?
Yeah. Whether they're really a monoculture, growing wall-to-wall maize or wheat, where Scotland we have a very diverse, there's malt and barley, there's wheat for brewing, there's barley growing for the cattle feed industry as well, because Scottish beef is one of our other real success stories where we command a real premium for our beef. So we have a very diverse, all in a short area, so we feel that we are doing a lot of greening, a lot of good greening stuff already.
So just quickly, because I noticed that we are starting to get on, in terms of Scotland's brand, particularly with its food, whether it's Aberdeen Angus sausages or whether it's our whiskey, would you say that it is currently being diluted? Not the whiskey itself, the brand.
Well, topical this week was our PGIs, as we call them, where we're identified brands that are Scottish. It could be Scotch beef or it can be Scotch whisky, which has to be distilled, or the beef has to be born and reared and fattened in Scotland to attract a premium. And the same with a whole host of different foods from different regions, certain cheeses and haggises and they're from different things. Our big concern is we'll lose that identifier and other people can try and copy it. So within Europe, these are protected names, registered names, and what we're looking for is a guarantee that these brands will be protected in the future when we leave the EU. So that's one of our big wishes, because we can't mass produce food in Scotland. we're only 60% sufficient in food within Scotland and or Britain anyway, and we can't produce food cheaply just because of weather issues and all sorts of things like that, and we have to be getting the most out of the marketplace as possible. So
you're talking about the PGI that was protected geographical indicators. When the European Union were doing the trade negotiations with Canada, the Comprehensive European Trade Association deal, every European country had the opportunity to put their PGIs in place. So you had feta cheese, you had Parma ham, we've got Stornoway black pudding, Arbroath smokies, Scotch beef, Scotch lamb, etc. We don't have a huge number of PGIs. We should have a lot more, but we don't have nearly enough. The UK were the only country in the EU who put no PGIs in place. They're the only ones during the CETA deal who didn't ask for any PGIs to be put in place. That's incredibly short-sighted, or they had another agenda. And depending on who you speak to will depend on how you think the UK government dealt with that. Immediately after the Scottish referendum in 2015, they had pictures of Ian Duncan surrounded by Scottish foods festooned in Union Jacks. And that's where the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign developed from. It was seeing Union Jacks going on to products. Now, Brand Scotland isn't just about the food industry. It's about, you go anywhere in Scotland and you're recognised as a Scot, be that through the saltire or whatever. People say, Scottish, I like that. Now, whatever it is that's done that, whatever it is that's created this comforting feeling or this feeling of quality, whatever it is that has given Scotland that, we should be clinging onto it with both hands, because as Willie says, we can't produce food in the mass scale that other countries can. We simply cannot do it. We have to have a unique product where people say, oh, that's Scottish, I'm going to buy that. That'll be quality. It's underpinned by the quality of our landscape, the quality of our welfare standards, the quality of the production systems that we have. If it's Scottish, people have this understanding, that's a quality product, so therefore I'm going to buy it. We need to do far more to market that. And the Scotland Food and Drink Initiative, Ambition 2030, is all about developing the food and drink industry to be worth £30 billion a year to the Scottish economy by the year 2030. And I get that there are some in the food industry or some in the farming industry as well. There's not enough of that coming back to the farming community. And I understand that, but we need to take a bit more responsibility in actually claiming some of that back and be far more involved in these production systems, do far more collaboration, because it's the only way we're going to get a bit more of that return. But we need to be right behind that Scotland Food and Drink Initiative. And people were accusing the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign of being nothing more than nationalist flag waving, and there shouldn't be any flag on it. Well, why cover it in Union Jacks? The saltire is not about flag waving nationalism on food or on other products. It's about saying this is a truly unique Scottish product, and it will give you the guarantees that you're looking for quality, provenance. The way it's been produced is giving you the reassurance that what you're getting is the best that it can possibly be. So in terms of branding, the brand Scotland in itself is a fantastic thing, and we need to make far more of it. My fear is that with the powers going back to the UK, that they now have this Great British campaign. We've already got this unique identity. Our industry has this unique identity. Why would we want to go and change it to a UK one when we're already ahead of the game? So when they started their Great British Food campaign in 2015, was it because of flattery? They looked at what Scotland Food and Drink had done and went, that's a great idea, let's do that. And missed the point that by trying to do it in Scotland, they were then trying to subsume what we had already created as an industry. Or was it something else? People will make up their own minds about what the motivation was, but what it shouldn't be is allowed to happen that Scotland's brand is diluted in any way, because that is the one thing that we can hang our hat on and say, if that's Scottish, I know that that's going to be a quality product, and therefore I'll pay more for it, and we have to protect it vigorously.
Now, with just a couple of minutes to go here, I'm just going to very quickly ask you about the boundary changes. Sorry, I should have given you a chance to talk about that first.
No, he covered it all.
Yeah. In that case, very quickly with the boundary changes, so we're going from what's been published is to go from 650 MPs down to 600. So in Scotland, that would be 59 seats down to 53. But one of the things that have been pointed out, one of the issues here is that for mainland Highlands, which is 2.5 times the size of Wales, is to be reduced to 2 constituencies. And I just want to talk about the logistics of that and get your thoughts on that, just very briefly, because we've only got a minute left.
Well, I remember going to judge blackface sheep up in Skye and thinking, are we ever going to get there? It took forever. And it's not as though the Highlands are festooned with dual carriageways, So for an MP to cover his constituency up there, they're going to get more than earn their pound of flesh. I think it's ludicrous that the Highlands can be reduced to having 2 people represent them. It's just madness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm the same as Jim. Yeah, I know it's probably based down to population. Maybe it's a reflection of the lack of people that are actually voters. There may be a lot of holiday houses, I don't know, and there's a lack of population, and that's a worry. And that's another thing, with support payments and stuff like that. It's maintaining these rural populations with a healthy agriculture underpinning these areas.
Absolutely.
Well, you absolutely need the agricultural community in the Highlands to keep it populated because it is so vast. And grazing agriculture is the only thing that will sustain these areas properly.
Okie doke. And so, the very last topic, Scottish Football Association staying in Hampden after agreeing to buy the stadium from Queen's Park. Any thoughts?
I think they could never have moved from Hampden. It's the spiritual home of Scottish football. So I'm quite for it. I hope they upgrade it. I hope they make it a better atmosphere in the stadium. I've been in there quite a few times and I want to feel a better atmosphere. However, it's the living guys on the pitch that we really need to worry about. They're the ones we need to get improved.
I've had my heart broken at Hampden, and I've also had some of the best 90 minutes ever. I remember Scotland beating France when France, I think, were the world champions at the time, and it couldn't get. It was the greatest night I ever had in Glasgow. I think I had to stay in Hampden. It's unfortunate where Hampden is, right in the middle of busy residential areas. It is hard. It's a nightmare to park. But we've all got our own wee streets. We know where to park, and you've got a good 2 or 3 mile walk to get to the stadium. The atmosphere usually is really good, but if you're either end, you feel detached from the game because of the running track, the oval track. They maybe could do something with both ends. That would be my suggestion.
Perhaps they could do something. So that will be that for today, I think. So thank you very much to both for coming. That was fantastic. And thank you to everyone that watched this full Scottish on Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Lindi Harrison. Don't forget to visit www.broadcastingscotland.scot to subscribe and of course to support the programme. Thank you very much.